Picture the scene. You're a Roman soldier, proud of your sword and shield, but all of that disappears when the enemy wins, and you become nothing more than a commodity. Men who once marched victoriously along the roads of empire are now reduced to figures in a slave market. Today you'll discover the darker side of Rome's wars, where humiliation, brutality, and inhumanity speak louder than any glory. And believe me, this story will leave you breathless. During the wars that ravaged the vast Roman Empire, the fate of captured soldiers was not always what one might call honorable or humane. While the legions marched confident of victory, many men ended up trapped by the enemy. At these times, the Roman soldier ceased to be a warrior to become a commodity. It was common for it to be taken to slave fairs, where its value was weighed in coins rather than glory. Men who once sported shields and swords were now measured as pieces of property. Their muscles and military skills turned into attractions for the most avid buyers. Each one had its price, varying according to its origin, abilities, and even appearance. The mere fact that he had been trained as a legionary made him valuable, for it meant discipline, strength, and obedience, qualities coveted by any master who wanted a strong and reliable slave. But not every prisoner was lucky enough to end up on a farm or serving as a domestic slave. Many of them were sold for forced labor in public works, mines, or quarries, places where brutality reigned and hope died. The accounts of the humiliations experienced by defeated Roman soldiers are as impactful as they are sad. One of the most well-known episodes is the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, when the Parthians defeated the Romans in a humiliating way. According to Plutarch, a soldier who physically resembled Marcus Licinius Crassus was forced to dress as a woman and parade through the streets of Parthia in a cruel and public farce, while the other prisoners were forced to applaud him as if he were the real General Crassus. This kind of spectacle was intended to break Roman morale, making it clear to everyone that not even the most powerful generals were safe from humiliation. If you were shocked by the cruelty these soldiers faced, imagine how many stories like this are still hidden behind the scenes of Roman history. If this story caught you, it's because you're also part of our legion of history lovers. So prove your loyalty now. Leave your like to strengthen our army of curious people, and subscribe to the channel before this opportunity disappears like prisoners in the mist of antiquity. Only then will you be granted immediate access to Rome's next dark secrets before it's too late. Still, public humiliation was not the only possible fate for these prisoners. In certain cases, there was a chance that they would be rescued by their families, friends, or the Roman state itself. This process, known as prisoner rescue, was particularly common for high-ranking soldiers whose lives had strategic or symbolic value. The families who managed to raise the necessary amount did everything to ensure the return of their own. It was not only a matter of affection, but also of honor and prestige. After all, having a relative back meant not only regaining a life, but also reaffirming the family's strength in the community. In some cases, the empire itself intervened, negotiating with diplomats and merchants to secure the release of its soldiers, thus strengthening the morale of the army and avoiding public embarrassment. During the long and bloody Roman conflict against Hannibal between 218 and 201 BC, the question of prisoners became even more complex. After the catastrophic defeat at Cannae in 216 BC, thousands of Roman soldiers were captured by the Carthaginians. Rome then had to deal with this tragedy, creating strategies to balance the losses. The exchange of prisoners became a valuable bargaining chip. Roman soldiers were used as a bargaining chip to rescue other comrades or even civilians captured on different fronts. This game of interests became a true political dance, where the value of human life was mixed with military importance and the need to maintain Roman dignity. Each exchange was accompanied by diplomatic tensions and decisions that could change the course of the war. Years later, another emblematic example of the dramatic situation of Roman prisoners occurred in the Teutoburg forest, where 40 years after the humiliating defeat of Varus, some survivors were still held as slaves among the Germanic tribes. During an offensive led by General Pomponius, these prisoners were finally rescued. Picture the scene. Men who had been torn from their legions, now scarred by the scars of slavery and shame, returning to an empire that barely recognized them as heroes. These rescues were not common, but when they did occur, they served to show that Rome's honor did not die easy. But this luck was for a few. Most Roman prisoners, especially those of low rank or without influence, ended up forgotten in the confines of the provinces, being sold as simple merchandise without any chance of redemption. It was in the most remote regions of the empire that the situation became even more desperate for the prisoners. There, the Roman presence was fragile, and the distance from the capital made any hope of rescue difficult. In these places, political alliances were unstable, and local lords acted in their own interests. Many prisoners were nothing more than numbers on a list of property, forgotten among so many other human goods. The humblest, without resources or political connections, were left to fend for themselves, condemned to serve as slaves for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, a few had the rare chance to be released for free. This was not out of generosity, but rather out of strategic interests. Freeing Roman prisoners could be a way to gain Rome's sympathy, pave trade agreements, or secure military support in future campaigns. Sometimes, the freedom offered to prisoners was accompanied by strict conditions. Many were released only under the promise that they would become allies of the victor, offering military services or intelligence on the Roman people themselves. It was a way to turn enemies into allies and to undermine Roman morale from the inside out. For some, this choice was a matter of survival. Betraying Rome could seem less painful than slavery or death. It was a risky move, both for the prisoners and for the enemy chieftains who bet on the loyalty of men who, until recently, had fought against them. This practice helped shape the political chess of the empire's borders, where war was not only fought with swords, but also with strategies of diplomacy and alliances forged in the fire of necessity. However, not all Roman prisoners even had the chance to live long enough to choose between loyalty and betrayal. Many found death, almost always cruel, as a form of exemplary punishment or ritual sacrifice. The historian Tacitus recounts horrible episodes, such as what happened after the defeat at Teutoburg. There, captured Roman officials were brutally executed and offered as sacrifices in Germanic religious ceremonies. Some tribes took barbarism to unimaginable levels, cooking the bodies of prisoners and using their bones in macabre rituals to invoke the protection of the gods. It was a way to mark the Roman defeat forever, with a spiritual scar, turning each dead soldier into part of the terror that the enemy wanted to propagate. Fear, after all, was a weapon as powerful as the sword. This dark and brutal reality, however, did not apply only to low-ranking soldiers. Even experienced officers who once commanded legions could end up reduced to slavery or cruel death. Fate was often decided on the battlefield, or at the negotiating tables that followed battles. The humiliation of captured generals, such as the case of Crassus and his parody in women's robes, was more than a punishment. It was a way of demonstrating to the world that even the most powerful Roman could be reduced to ridicule. This psychological strategy weakened the morale of the remaining troops and made it clear that enemy victory was not limited to weapons, but also advanced in the field of reputation. And so, with each defeat, the shadow of captivity grew, turning proud men into living trophies of war. Amid all this backdrop of captured prisoners and grim fates, it was clear that the life of a Roman soldier was not worth much beyond the battlefield. The coins that paid for their bodies were just ciphers in slave traders' accounts. A few were saved by their families' gold or by Rome's diplomatic intervention, but most remained in the shadows of slavery, and so the battles were not only decided by spears and gladius, but also by the power game that followed behind the scenes: alliances, rescues, betrayals. An uncertain fate, where physical strength meant little in the face of the cruelty of the enemy and the indifference of the slave market. In the end, Rome's greatness did not prevent its children from becoming bargaining chips in the hands of their enemies. That was the price of empire and the weight that each soldier carried. This story reminds us that the Roman Empire, as grand and imposing as it was, had in its bowels a cruel and dark reality. Each captured soldier was not just another number in the accounts of the battles, but a human being who carried within himself the marks of defeat and humiliation. As we look back at these episodes, such as the Battle of Carrhae, where the Roman soldier was turned into an object of public derision, we realize that even the most powerful could be brought to naught when they fell into enemy hands. This brutal reality reminds us that war was never only made of glories and victories, but also of deep pain and scars. By remembering these stories, we not only give voice to those who have been forgotten, but we also learn that human dignity, once stolen, leaves wounds that history can never completely erase. If this story moved you as it did when writing it, reciprocate this journey of knowledge with a simple gesture. Leave your like to show me that it was worth bringing this truth to light, and go further. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because together we are transforming curiosity into learning and rescuing the voices of those who time has almost made us forget. It's not just about history, it's about turning every detail into something that changes how you see the past, and who knows, even the present.